they did some tests, and then they put me on some meds, and they brought it down to like 300. And I was pretty excited about that. And Dr. Weiss says, it's still no good. So he put me on a maximum of several drugs because my body could take it. And that brought my cholesterol down. Now I'm like 170, 175. And a few years ago, sitting down with Dr. Weiss, he looked at my chart and he said, all of my other patients with your history are dead. So because of my high tolerance for the meds, and I've been taking the meds, so, and I don't eat the right stuff like my daughter does. And then so we had the kids tested. I had 3 kids. He had it, and she had it. That came from my dad, who died at 32 in a car accident, but my mother said that he had, that was in 1943, he had angina so bad that he couldn't walk 100 feet without stopping. And, you know, in those days, people used to say, oh, look at this, all his face is red, he's robust, he's really healthy. But, you know, then people died because they didn't know.
I knew that I probably had a problem when I was younger because my dad told me that I had a problem with it, but I completely ignored it. Felt like it's not going to take me down, you know what I mean? So I was, you know, I didn't take any meds. I didn't really go to the doctors too much until my mid-30s also. I was 34. I actually, I had a heart attack, pretty good sized one. And I think I had a couple of heart attacks before that, because after I've had my heart attack, I felt the same feelings before that. Like my arms were numb, my chest was tight, I would get really white in the face and sweat really hard, and I always wanted my wife to like rub my shoulders to get, I don't know, maybe blood flow or something, I don't know. But it had happened at least a couple of times before I actually went to the hospital and did that, you know, because I was in great shape, you know. I was playing hockey, I was playing softball, I was working, I had a couple kids at the time, and yeah, I wasn't taking my meds. I was probably doing all the wrong things. I was eating wrong, I was smoking, I was doing, I'm sure I was chewing tobacco, I was doing all the wrong things. But then after it happened, I went down to the, you know, the day that I had my heart attack, it was about afternoon. I had all 3 of my kids, and they were young at the time, and maybe the stress was high or something was going on, but I got really, you know, weak. My arms got numb, just like I said, and getting white in the face and sweated a lot. And my wife said, you got to go to the hospital. You know, we're going to bring you down there. I was like, let me take a shower first. You know, I just got out of work. I wasn't sure what was going on, so took a shower, brings me down to the hospital. I get down in there, and you know, they do the test where they test to see what type of chemicals your body is secreting or whatever, and my body was doing that. And so I was having a full-fledged heart attack at the time. So they immediately put nitroglycerin into my body, and once they did that, I felt great. You know, that really opened up my arteries, and you know, I felt great at that point. So a day or 2 went by, and you know, my doctor came in and said, you know, you might have to have bypass surgery. I wasn't sure what it was at the time. I know my dad had gone through some things. I don't think he had bypass surgery, but he had a stent put in at that time. It took me about 8 months to get past that process of having you know, open heart surgery. You know, I was afraid. I was, you know, I didn't know what was going on. I looked into a lot of things. I pretty much became a vegetarian. I was very scared of everything that I ate, everything that was around me. If anybody was smoking near me, I didn't want them around me because I was paranoid about everything, because I thought maybe it was going to happen again to me. Because I had, you know, 3 small children at the time too, so you know, but I felt weak. You know, the food that I was eating wasn't. I lost a lot of weight. I was down to like 135, and I just wasn't gaining my weight back. I wasn't feeling energetic, and so then about 8 months after that, you know, I stopped doing that. I started eating, you know, fish and, you know, meat and stuff like, you know, protein. And I still continue to this day try and eat as healthy as I can. You know, try and stay away from the canned foods and stuff like that. Eat as many fruits and vegetables as I can, but I do still eat like, you know, fish and meat and steak and hamburger. Like my dad said, I mean, he takes his meds, and I also have to take a lot of meds myself. I take all of the highest dosage of, I think it's Crestor, and a couple of the other ones that I take. Plus I have gout, so I always have to take allopurinol too. So maybe about 4 or 5 pills a day is what I take. And I try and take it as much as possible. I'm not as on it as my dad is, but you know, I would say 90% of the time I'm taking it.
Well, that's very
And my cholesterol level at that point I think it was 425 when I had my heart attack. Now I think it's about 151. My bad cholesterol is just hovering over 100. I know I want to be under 100, maybe in the 70s would be great, but I'm just hovering over 100, maybe 105, 110 right now with taking my meds. So
took meds in my early 20s to try to keep my cholesterol right around 200. But then as I neared my childbearing years, I went off the meds. I went off the meds for about 10 years and had 3 children. And my cholesterol hovered in the upper 300s, 390. All the numbers were not good. Maybe my HDL was okay, but my triglycerides were not good. My LDL was not good. And then after my brother had his episode, which he didn't mention, it was a quintuple bypass surgery, so he needed 5 bypasses. That was an eye-opener for me to spend some time with him the day after his surgery. So then I hooked back up with the doctor and got back on my meds and just ate the regular standard American diet. I never smoked, so I had that on my side. And I'm a woman, as opposed to these guys being men. And my dad did smoke before. So I would definitely say what my brother said. If you have FH, if you have high cholesterol, do not smoke. Find somebody to help you get over and quit smoking. So I thought I always ate good until I got into my mid-40s, and I just didn't feel good. But I was lucky enough to have a really good doctor who had been with me for about 10 years, and I wanted to start experimenting with food. So first I tried being a vegetarian, although when you give up meat, you fill that void with pasta and breads, which wasn't good. My cholesterol went up. So I did that in September of 2011, and then in January of 2012, that's when I decided to try a vegan diet, and I managed to get my cholesterol below 200 for the first time in my life. I take my meds. I only take 1 pill, unlike my brother and my dad. I take Vytorin. And then I wanted to keep going. So I'd given up the meat, I'd given up the dairy, and I thought, well, what about raw food? What if I ate raw for breakfast and for lunch? Well, that was the lowest I ever got my cholesterol down to 160. So when I had met with a specific doctor in my office, he didn't believe me that diet could affect my cholesterol. He just said scientifically it doesn't make sense. I said, well, draw my blood right now and check my cholesterol. My total cholesterol on that day was 170. So I take my meds, I watch what I eat, and I exercise. And I feel really good at 49 years old. When they were younger, you know, I was working full time, 3 kids. You just ate on the run. You ate on the go, the fastest thing you could make. So when my kids were little, they were just eating the regular standard American diet. But 3 years ago when I went vegan, started cooking vegan, and both my girls have high cholesterol. They probably have FH as well. And Jill's almost vegan, and when she's home from school, she's out of college now, but when she's home, she chooses to eat and drink whatever mom eats and drinks, and it helps her to feel better.
We really got serious about getting the family tested when Carl had his heart attack. So I have been on medication since I was 10 years old, and in the morning it was drink a glass of orange juice with this really gross powder in it and choke it down. And you know, at 10 years old, you're like, what is cholesterol? You don't know any of the human anatomy yet. You know nothing about that. So you're just drinking this orange juice every morning. And for a while, in high school, I wasn't that great at taking my medicine. By then, I had gone on pills. I was over the orange juice. I've always had a really hard time swallowing pills. So that was an episode. That was a struggle for like 5 years. But now that I've gotten past the pill swallowing thing, I'm on 40 milligrams of Crestor every day. When I was 10, my cholesterol was about 350. And now it's between 160 and 180 most of the time. When my mom decided to go vegan, she went in January and I was in college, so she had about a 5-month period where she was testing it and she had really great results. So then that summer when I came home from college, I said, I'm going to eat every single thing that you eat. And I was a very, very strict vegan. I didn't eat any meat, no cheese, no dairy, nothing. And my cholesterol was really, really good. It was almost 150. And then you go back to college and you're eating in a cafeteria, and of course they have the vegetarian section, but the vegetarian section has so much cheese in it. So that year I was pretty good. I mean, I went from drinking like half a gallon of milk today to never drinking milk at all. So that alone probably helped a lot. But every time I'd come home, I was very strictly vegan. And then senior year, I finally had my own kitchen. And I was known as the crazy girl who made all this weird food, but yet all my neighbors would always come over and be like, that's vegan? I can't believe that's vegan. Like, it's really good. So now that I'm home, I eat a lot of vegan, but of course, when you go to someone else's house, you have to be respectful of what they make. So I never eat meat, but a lot of people don't understand what vegan is. So they'll make half hamburger lasagna and then half veggie lasagna. And they're like, look at this great meal that I made you. And I'm like, thank you. And I'll eat it. Of course, it's stuffed with cheese and everything, but I mean, I ate meat and cheese and eggs and everything for the first 20 years of my life. So I know it's not going to kill me in a sense. Then again, cholesterol does kill a lot of people. So I just have to be really careful. And like my mother, I'm not going to be able to be on medication the whole time I'm having children. I'm not at that stage yet. But in the next 5 years, I may want to have children. So that's going to be a whole period where, I mean, I'm going to have to either be really strictly vegan, which is also hard because you have to make sure you're getting enough nutrients for your child. So that's going to be an interesting period. But for now, I feel great. I exercise a lot. I danced for 18 years of my life. I'm out of college now and I'm not dancing and I'm missing it like crazy. But so far, so good. No episodes. I take my pills. It doesn't affect my everyday life in the sense that I have no pain. I have a doctor's appointment once a year, which is fine, but normal as a person with FH in their mid-20s can be, so.
Hello, my name is Dr. Dervla McCann. I'm a cardiologist practicing in Central Maine with an interest in genetic heart disease. While I've been practicing here in New England, I've made a discovery about genetics that is a very interesting story I'd like to share with you. The genetic disorder that I've become interested in is called familial hypercholesterolemia, or FH for short. To understand FH, particularly in the New England area, I need to tell you a story that combines geography, history, and culture. Let's start with geography. The great rivers of New England. Many have names given to them by the native people who lived along their banks and tributaries. The Kennebec, the Androscoggin, the Merrimack, the Connecticut. These great arteries have served as a source of food and water, transportation, and power, shaping the history of the people of the region. Water power from these rivers was the natural resource that centered the textile manufacturing of the U.S. Industrial Revolution in New England. Throughout the 1800s, mills sprang to life from Maine to Connecticut, and the need for skilled laborers grew. Many workers for the factories and mills of New England came from America's northern neighbor, Canada. In particular, the French Canadians, who were descendants of the original founders of Quebec, were drawn to the work in the textile mills of the northeastern states, where they were offered high wages and predictable employment. In the 1850s, a wave of immigration to America began, eventually leading to more than 200,000 French Canadians leaving Canada. River travel made way to a railroad system from Quebec through New England. Several enterprising businessmen raised money to build a short addition to the railroad system, enabling the immigrants to end their journey close to the mills, like this one in Lewiston, Maine, where a small rail depot sits just next to the large Bates textile mill. This was one of the very first stops on the way south from Quebec, and thousands disembarked here, staying in this region of central Maine for the remainder of their lives. A particularly strong Franco-American presence was established in the New England region and persists to this day. Often, one family member, such as a father, would begin work and then send for his family, who were also able to work at the mills. Child labor was considered a necessity, particularly in the weaving of cotton, where any break in the thread would shut down the weaving machine. The broken threads had to be hand-tied in order for the work to start again, and the smaller hands of women and children were better suited to this task. Sharing a common language, faith, and history, the Franco-Americans often lived in close-knit communities called Little Canadas near the factories that employed them.
I was coming down the one-way street on Oxford Street, and I saw the lady was sitting on the stoop, and it reminded me because I have relatives that lived on Lincoln Street, so we played in Little Canada when I was little. And so when I was coming down the street, she recognized me, and I saw her get up, and I said, she turned around, she went, "Hey, Louise!" And I thought it was so funny. It brought so many memories because that's how they used to communicate. Louise lives on the 3rd floor, and I remember they used to talk to each other from window to window over the street. You know, "T'as-tu du sucre? J'ai besoin, je te faire une tarte," you know, and, you know, so they brought the sugar over and stuff. And so it was really interesting, you know, and we asked her if we could go into the tenement to see where her apartment was. And she brought us up. And one of the things that she commented on, she says, "You would never see this before," because there was sand on the floors and stuff, because if you went into a French-Canadian home, you could eat off the floor because that's how clean they kept their place. And when I walked in, I looked at that, I went, oh my goodness, the dining room was huge. I said, my goodness, this is a dance hall. And she said, well, you got to remember, we were big families. She says, we were 12 kids. So we had to have a big dining area. But then when you went to the little rooms around, it was a bed with 2-3 kids in each bed, you know, and so it was very interesting to go back to that time.
The work was difficult, in conditions that we now recognize as unhealthy and unsafe. Though the work was hard, family and social support was strong, and large families were common, their health considered a blessing. Music and dance were woven through the leisure times of the Franco-Americans. There is a French saying, "Lose your language, lose your soul." And though the language lived on in the large Franco-American communities, speaking French came with a price.
Well, of course, we went to French school only, which was St. Peter's and St. Paul's School and so on. We only started learning in school English around the 3rd grade, only one class.
I have a brother I had a brother, he's passed away now, who's only 15 months younger than I. And in high school, the French kids had to stick together because you weren't allowed into the clubs. And,
In the 1950s, the Ku Klux Klan had a large membership in New England. In Lewiston, Auburn, the group's membership included Protestant church leaders and the local chief of police. Their activities targeted Franco-Americans who had held on to the culture that made them distinct from the English-speaking Americans. They were natural targets for intolerance. Despite hard work and prejudice, French-speaking descendants of the original founders of Quebec continued to work and live in the industrial centers and handed down their unique culture, Catholic religion, and language to their children. In 1900, the average life expectancy in the U.S. was only 46 years for men and 48 for women. Over the next 100 years, due in large part to public health improvements and an understanding of the cause of infections, life expectancy became much longer.
We were 5 children. 6, we lost our first, Mom lost the first daughter. I'd have an older sister. Often they used to call them blue babies. She seemed to be fine. She was born at home and with my grandmother taking care of the birth, and everything was fine, and then the second day something happened and she turned blue and they lost her.
During that period, it became more evident that culture was not the only thing handed down to the new generations. As the general population lived longer, it became obvious that the Franco-Americans had a high rate of heart attacks, often at an early age. It was not until the late 1900s, however, that the reason for this was revealed. It was found in a gene that caused high cholesterol levels. Many Franco-Americans have this form of genetic heart disease called familial hypercholesterolemia, or FH for short. Familial hypercholesterolemia is one of the most common life-threatening inherited medical conditions, but only 10% of individuals with this disorder have been diagnosed. FH leads to heart attacks and strokes at an early age, but it is treatable. If you have FH, each of your close family members has a 50% chance of having the disorder. FH affects men, women, and children of every racial and ethnic group around the world, but we know that in the United States, Franco-Americans are at particularly high risk. FH is treatable. Although you can't change your history, you can change your future. The all-important first step is getting your cholesterol checked. If your cholesterol is high, learn more about it. There are many great resources of information about what to do, including the American Heart Association and the Familial Hypercholesterolemia Foundation.